Okay, a lot of new Goblins vs. Gnomes cards were recently revealed. There are 62 of them. Pull up a chair, lean back and relax, because this is going to take some time. Let's start with Bolvar Fordragon, starting off with a bang. 5 mana, 1/7. The new Paladin legendary. Very hyped Bolvar Fordragon, a huge card in World of Warcraft lore. And then you look at the card, and it's 5 mana, 1/7. And there are tremendous outcries on all the forums. Okay, so obviously if you have a 5 mana, 1/7, the card text better be really good in order to make up for that. So the card text is whenever a friendly minion dies, while this is in your hand, gain +1 attack. And that is really cool, because it is the first card to have this mechanic. As I was saying that, I was just reminded by Handlock with Mountain Giants, Suds card, and Molten Giants, and Sea Giants. So that's not quite true, but you get the point. The only one where the stats change in your hand actively. And by the way, Blizzard has given a clarification that you won't have to keep track of the cards, but rather the attack value will change while it's in your hand. First of all, basic calculations. What does a 5 mana card need to be? What stats does it need to be good at? So the easiest one to compare to is Fugin, 5 mana, 4/7. If it dies, you get an enormous upside. So it needs to be better than the 5 mana, 4/7. Is a 5 mana, 5/7 good? 5 mana, 5/7 is really good. Everyone would play that if that card existed. This card can be silenced though, so that's a problem. So let's say in order to be good, you want it to be a 5 mana, 5/7. You'll want 4 friendly minions to have died. And I was also thinking about, if you have Bolvar Fordragon in your opening hand, do you keep it? And I think the answer almost unanimously, no matter what deck you're playing, if you're going first, the answer is no. Unless you also have a good curve. And that would be the dream. Because if you're only playing with 2 cards, that's really tough. I guess you could keep Bolvar if your opening hand's other 2 cards were good, but otherwise I think you need to get rid of it. When you're going second, you have a slightly better chance of keeping it in your opening hand. So how often does a friendly minion die? Well, that depends on the type of deck you're running, but the Paladin in particular always has the ability to summon Silverhand recruits. Also, that new card released, Muster for Battle, turns out to synergize with quite a lot of the cards that were revealed, and with Bolvar. You just cast 1 Muster for Battle, and this is already going to be a 4/7. So I think this card does not suck as much as people say it sucks. And even if it does end up sucking, it's a really cool game mechanic worthy of fitting on Bolvar Fordragon, I would say. You probably don't play this in an aggressive deck because you need to give it time. The only way this would ever work in an aggressive deck is if you lucked out and got Bolvar Fordragon in your opening hand and had a good curve for the rest, which I don't see happening very often. So you're going to put this in a control deck or a mid-range deck, and it's certainly going to be worth experimenting with. It is a very tricky card to review, so I guess I have to hold off on saying whether or not it's good or bad until I actually play it. In Arena, if this was a 5 mana 3/7, it'd be okay, because Fugin is a good card in Arena. So that would just be something as simple as drawing the card and then making a guy and then playing a guy and then playing Bolvar the next turn. Yeah, okay, this card is really good in Arena. After spending above my average allotted time on Bolvar Fordragon, this is one of those easy ones to review. Flying Machine is a 3 mana 1/4, so obviously the card text needs to be really good in order to justify that. All it has is Wind Fury, and it also has a mech, so it has that going for it. Unfortunately, this card is just below the power curve. Like, you compare this to the vanilla 3 mana 3/4 mech that's coming out. Do you want a 1/4? Or do you want a 3/4? And yes, it's got Wind Fury, but that's just not good enough. This card is nearly strictly outclassed by the 3 mana 3/4. It'll never see play in Constructed. In Arena, it's going to be a weak pick. Is this going to be even weaker than Thrallmar Farseer in Arena? We'll have to see how much mech matters. Low tier card. Arcane Nullifier, X21. Tougher to remove with spells Taz Dingo. This card really fits a specific role. 4 mana 3/5 with Taunt is, of course, your lovely everyday Sen'jin Shieldmaster. And the cost to knock 1 attack value off is giving the benefit can't be targeted by spells or hero abilities. This card is really specifically aimed at certain decks, like remove a guy in the way and then charge through. For example, perhaps a Miracle Rogue, where you might play your Tazdingo or your Sludge Belcher, but then they just sap it and attack through. Now you can't do it with Arcane Nullifier. The card's stats are weak against decks that don't specifically do that. I haven't seen any spells in particular that would make me believe that the one attack knockoff is worth this Fairy Dragon ability. My instinct is that this card is really quite a specific counter and constructed, and the stat it loses, like when you go from Yeti to Tazdingo, a lot of people in Constructed have done that because the metagame is just so fast, and your 3 attack guy can actually deal with almost any problem that aggressive decks throw at you. You know, now that I think about it, a lot of the aggressive decks only have exactly 2 health on their minions. Mad Scientist, Direwolf Alpha, Flame Imp. So yeah, maybe it's okay against those specific decks. It is worth mentioning this is one of the best cards to grab with Cabal Shadow Priest now. And Cabal Shadow Priest did get a buff because of Shrinkmeister. So this card is designed very specifically to stop either very fast aggressive decks and then make them have to trade minions into this, or to specifically stop a combo deck which tries to like sap your guy and then charge you down. I think at this point the stat loss might be too big. So I'm going to say that this card will be below average unless the metagame shifts in a very radical way. Arena, the weakness of this card is going to be more pronounced. 4 mana 2/5 just isn't going to cut it in a format where the stats are so much more important and the spells / hero power drawback, it's not that big a deal. Like in Arena, Spectral Knight is fine. That's because the stats are good for a 5 mana card, 5 mana 4/6, but for 4 mana, you're trying to get a 4 mana 4/5 or 4 mana 3/5 with taunt, but nah. And in Arena, like, Yeti is so much better than Tazdingo already because the taunt doesn't work around the very specific aggressive decks. Anima Golem. 6 mana 9/9. So I love cards which have big payoffs and big drawbacks. Warlock card. At the end of each turn, destroy this minion if it's your only one. Now, that's a problem because this is like one of the most drawback heavy cards I've ever seen. In some way, it's like a strictly win more card if you just play it by following the rules. If you play it with something out there already and your opponent couldn't remove that other something, like almost by definition you were ahead anyways. So therefore what you need is some way to cheat with the Anima Golem. It is also a mech. So in order to cheat it out, here's some things you can do. You can silence it with something like an owl, stealth minions. Those are certainly a big thing. But yeah, this is one of those cards which has potential to make a deck by itself. One of the things about Hearthstone is that the deck size is significantly smaller than average deck sizes. 30 cards in a deck is smaller than many other card games. Any card that's not a legendary, which you can put 2 of in a deck, that's 2 out of 15. Or sorry, 2 out of 30, which is 1 out of 15. You could consistently build a strategy around playing this card. So you could build a deck around Anima Golem. Every deck needs something unfair when you're in Constructed in order to work. Handlock, the unfair thing is that you're playing 4 mana 8/8s and 4 mana 4/10s. If you're playing Druid, the unfair thing is you're always 1 mana ahead of your opponent with Wild Growth. Or you get something out on turn 3, which you can only play on turn 7. And this is unfair. It's a 6 mana 9/9. But the question is usually like, how much unfairness can you get in a reasonable fashion? And is your unfairness in a combo good enough by itself? And obviously, Anima Golem is not good enough by itself. So the only question is, would your stealthed minions be good individually as well? And I'm currently leaning towards no. It costs so much mana to play this and silence it The cheapest way to do that as a Warlock is with the Ironbeak Owl. So that would be like an 8 mana 9/9, which isn't that good. What if you get the Dream? You have 2 Ancient Watches out, and then on turn 10 you play Anima Golem and Wailing Soul. The problem with that is that, you have a plan that revolves around turn 10. That's bad. So it's a cool design. It pushes the limits. You could push the limits even more if it were like a 5 mana 9/9. But obviously, whenever you make a 6 mana 9/9, you're going to need to have a severe drawback. And this is a severe drawback. I think it's severe enough that people will try it out, and then it'll be decided that it won't work. In Arena, this card is incredibly bad, because this card needs to have a deck built around it. There exists a deck with Anima Golem. It is almost certainly going to be designed specifically for the purpose of playing Anima Golem, because that's your ticket to an unfair deck. You're playing a 6 mana 9/9. And I mean, it's not that hard, right? You play your 2 mana, you play your 3 mana Shade of Naxxramas, you play your 2 mana 2/3 Stealth, and then you just play your 6 mana 9/9. Here's another problem though. Like, is that level of unfairness rivaling Handlock yet? Handlock, you play a 4 mana 8/8. Like, that's better than the 6 mana 9/9. But the thing about Handlock is that their unfairness has a weakness that they can't do anything on turn 2 or 3. But with Anima Golem on turn 3, you can play your 2/3 Stealth, you can play your 3 mana Shade of Naxxramas, and then you play the Anima Golem. So, one of those highly variable cards where there's a deck idea, build it, see whether or not it works. We'll see. Oh, hey, here's that card. So, 2 mana 2/3 Gilbin Stalker. I have no idea what a Gilbin is. It's one of those more obscure monsters in World of Warcraft, I guess. Anyways, 2 mana 2/3 Stealth. I suppose it's easier to talk about Arena first. This card's incredible in Arena for the same reason that Worgen Infiltrator is good. Suppose they have a 3 mana 3/3 and a 1 mana 2/1. Then you can actually play your Gilbin Stalker and then send it into 2/1 later. Probably not going to be strong enough in Constructed unless you're playing with the Anima Golem deck. Force Tank Max. Most expensive common card. 8 mana 7/7 Divine Shield Mech. Wow, that's so big. This card sucks, but it's pretty cool. So War Golem +1, you get Divine Shield, it's a mech. If you're playing 8 mana for a card, it needs to do something immediately or be awesome. This thing does do something immediately, it gets Divine Shield, but that's not enough. In Arena, I believe this card is actually better than War Golem. The Divine Shield is kind of worth 2 health. Think of it as an 8 mana 7/9. There are ways to ping off Divine Shield for 1 with a hero ability, but you don't want to really do it with Rogue, and you don't really want to do it with Druid. So the easiest way to do it was with Mage. But I mean, how popular is Mage going to be in Goblins versus Gnomes? Who knows? Like, it's certainly very popular now, but it doesn't have to be moving forward. This card's probably going to be slightly below average in Arena, but if you're looking for big drops, like, it's a reasonable pickup. Hemet Nesingwary, 5 mana 6/3. Battlecry, destroy a beast. Pew! Alright, so let's compare this with another situational removal. Black Knight, 6 mana 4/5 Battlecry, destroy a taunt. Hemet Nesingwary is a lot more situational. So the good news is Druid of the Claw getting changed to a beast actually means Hemet Nesingwary has significantly more targets. When I think about beasts that are played commonly in other decks, the only beast that comes to mind right now is Haunted Creeper, when you're not specifically up against Hunter, or you're not up against Druid. If you're not up against Hunter or Druid, you have a 5 mana 6/3. No, that just sucks, because 2 mana 3/2 trades with it. Okay, Direwolf Alpha, Inzu, that's true. Owl, that's true. That's true. Anyways, this card is too situational, unless the metagame is... Okay, if it's Control Hunter, the Hemet Nesingwary is like the best card ever. You just snipe Gozrilla off. This is a card that you would also play if Druids were all over the place, because people are playing Black Knight because Sludge Belcher is all over the place. But if Druids and Hunters are the metagame, I guess you can play Hemet Nesingwary. Obviously only good in that metagame. In Arena, beasts are a little bit more common, but the stats are significantly weaker than Black Knight. Probably going to be turning out to be a slightly, like somewhere in the zone of average to below average. Hobgoblin, 3 mana 2/2. One of the things that I'm going to clarify is that Sword of Justice's text reads, whenever you summon a minion, give it +1/+1. This card says, whenever you play a minion, give it +2/+2. So it will not trigger on the Paladin hero power. The card's really specific in that sense then. And we have confirmation from Ben Brode that summoning and playing is different. So what are some cards that are 1 attack which you can work with this? Stoneskin Gargoyle, if you're running a deck with Hobgoblin. Stoneskin Gargoyle isn't a thing and will never be a thing. Stop. Undertaker, Haunted Creeper, Voidwalker, and Zoo. But the problem is you usually want to play those out on turn 1, 2. Can you really afford to go Hobgoblin into that? I don't think so in Zoo. Like, most 1 attack minions really suck right now, and it's nice that they printed something to give that 1 attack minion, like, better. I anticipate that some people are going to try to make some bad Hobgoblin decks, and they put Hobgoblin and a bunch of bad cards in it, and it's not going to work. Warrior Control runs Acolyte of Pain and Armor Smith, but obviously you can't run Hobgoblin in a Warrior Control deck. I don't think I even need to try it out to say that it's not worth trying out in Constructed. In Arena, this card is going to be awful. Junkbot. 5 mana 1/5. Whenever a friendly mech dies, gain +2/+2. Kind of like Cogmaster in the sense that ideally you play it on the same turn that you send a bunch of mechs to die. Unlike Cogmaster, it does have 5 health, which is nice because it's a lot bigger. And the health gets bigger as mechs die. But it's just that the stats are really weak to begin with. And this card, even in a dedicated mech deck, will probably not see play, just because it starts off too weak. Kind of a, if you're ahead already or you're about to trade, then it's extremely good, but to get that kind of situation, like, even though it happens a significant amount of times, for it to happen and for you to have Junkbot in your hand, and they certainly don't outweigh the amount of times where, like, you don't specifically have a board about to trade and then you play Junkbot. I don't see it working out. If this card cost 4 mana, I would still probably say the same thing. So that it costs 5 is like, meh. Like, can you even think that the average situation in Constructed is it comes into play as a 5 mana 3/7? Because in Constructed, most of the time that you're playing in a control oriented matchup, boards are removed as soon as they come up. This is the same reason why a lot of the cards which benefit when your other stuff dies don't get played. I don't think the average case for this is a 5 mana 3/7 basically. Yeah, I think it sucks. In Arena, this is also going to suck. It'll suck even more because you can't build a mech deck in Arena. Well, you can't reliably have that many mechs in Arena. 4 mana 4/3 Kezan Mystic. That face is so calming. She's like, it's alright, I'm here. The time of secrets is over. That might be the cutest goblin I've ever seen. Take control of a random enemy secret. It's been confirmed that this goes off before Mirror Entity. It goes off before Snipe. 4/3 is kind of a 3 mana card. You add a mana. Obviously, this is countering secrets. Neutral Secret Buster. And it's not just destroy a secret, it's you take control of it. So kind of a 3-for-1. That's pretty awesome. This card's going to rotate in and out of play depending on how popular hunters and mages are. And if Paladin secrets ever become a thing. Paladin secrets aren't going to become a thing. In Arena, this card will be average? Below average-ish. Kind of depends on the meta of Arena also. Like whether or not people really like playing Mage and Hunter. And Paladin, because in Arena, Paladin secrets are actually being run. Average in Arena. Yeah. It's like bad in 6 out of 9 matchups, and like sometimes good in 3 out of 9 matchups. Alright, somewhere between below average and average. Mechanical Yeti! Oh man. Oh boy. Alright, yo. So we took your Yeti and we decided to mechanize it. That's awesome. A lot of people look at this and are like, oh my gosh, the power creep is real. So there's Yeti, and then it became a mech. The death rattle is pretty symmetrical, so it shouldn't matter too much, except like death rattle obviously has benefits, like it works with Undertaker. Probably the biggest part is it's a mech. In Constructed, your Yetis are only being run in Druid right now, but a mechanical Yeti, like if it has mech, I see it working in a lot of mech decks. And in Arena, this card is going to beat Yeti and might be like the best neutral card out there now, since it is a 4 mana 4/5, and Yeti was like the best neutral card before. Now it's a mech also. Yeah, this card is really strong. Metaltooth Leaper, 3 mana 3/3 hunter card, mech. Battlecry, give your other mechs +2 attack. In Constructed, you build an aggressive mech deck, and you put Metaltooth Leaper in it. And it's like Savage Roar, except permanent. It's like Dark Iron Dwarf, except it hits all your mechs permanently. That's insane. In Arena, like, it's already a 3 mana 3/3, which is average. It's also a mech, which is good. It also gives your other mechs +2 attack permanently. That's pretty good too. Very strong card. Will definitely see play in Hunter mech decks and Constructed. Will definitely be a good pick in Arena. Somewhere between a good and excellent pick, depending on how many other mechs you have and how much mech synergy you have. You got a Rogue Pirate card. It's cool to see more pirates. The One-Eyed Cheat. I love this card design. 2 mana 4/1. So obviously if it ended there, I would hate the card since it only has 1 health. But whenever you summon a pirate, gain stealth. This actually allows for quite a bit of finesse. The obvious way to play it is you play the One-Eyed Cheat with a pirate. You give the One-Eyed Cheat stealth. Hopefully the opponent doesn't have a way to remove the stealth or kill stuff around stealth. You attack with the One-Eyed Cheat, you summon a pirate, you gain stealth again. Pretty nice. Yeah, I could see a pirate deck working. In Arena, this card is terrible. It's got 1 health. You can't build a pirate deck in Arena. Shadowboxer. The Priest 2 mana mech. 2 mana 2/3 mech. That by itself is already pretty okay. Whenever a character is healed, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. It's not as good as it looks, is what I'm going to say. Yes, Northshire Cleric is insane, but that's because you draw a card. Deal 1 damage to a random enemy is less good than draw a card. Like, imagine if Knife Juggler said, whenever you summon a minion, draw a card. That's insane. But deal 1 damage to a random enemy, nice bonus. Probably will be seen in Priest mech decks. Don't see it being a worthy addition to current Priest control decks. Kind of the same reasoning that you don't put Knife Juggler in your Priest control deck or even Death Rattle Priest right now. There's not that much synergy you can get in between the healing and then dealing damage, I think. But certainly a fair card because 2 mana 2/3 mech is already good, adding a bonus. So basically my opinion on this card is it's not as good as people think it is, but it is good. And yes, if you heal yourself, you will deal 1 damage to a random enemy. Okay, I guess that makes it slightly better than I think it is. You can even heal your opponent, that's true. And then you deal 1 damage to a random enemy, which is often going to be good. Could this card make a Priest aggro deck viable? Well, it certainly seems most fitting for that type of deck. Because the only other mass healing currently used is Circle of Healing, which seems to defeat the purpose of Shadowboxing. I mean, here's kind of the dream. You play against the Hunter right now. You play the Shadowboxer. Maybe you even coin out the Shadowboxer as the dream. Your opponent plays... We're going to be nice and just say he plays 2 Leopard Gnomes. You Shadowbox one of the Leopard Gnomes. You heal your Shadowboxer. And then your Shadowboxer punches out the other Leopard Gnome. That's the dream. It's going to be excellent in Arena. Arena is slow enough that you can get this to work. It's a 2 mana 2/3 mech. Obviously better if you have mech cards that matter. This is one of the cards I'm most excited about as being a Paladin. We got a 2 mana 2/2 mech with Divine Shield. Like, this is the exact card the Paladins needed. They needed something in the early game to stop the bleeding. And this card is really tough. And it's a mech. So it's kind of nice if Paladins ever go into the mech route. Like, right now, the Paladins had a problem of their Argent Protector, which is a 2 mana 2/2 Battlecry, gave someone Divine Shield. Like, you couldn't play that on turn 2 because you would have nothing out there. And even if you played your 1 mana into 2 mana card, like, you don't really want to give your 1-mana card Divine Shield. And in the cases that you do, like, that's not even that consistent. Yeah, this card's really good, and I used to play Zombie Chow in my Control Paladin decks, but hey, maybe you play this card instead. Fun story is Zombie Chow still trades evenly with this. That's how good Zombie Chow is. I see this working well in an aggressive deck as well, since it's especially good with buff cards. Any card with Divine Shield is. Back in the day, I used to have Argent Squire and Zoo. Shielded Minibot would be better than Argent Squire, I would say. Certainly sees plays in mech decks. In non-mech decks, I think it's a consideration if you need something in the early game. In aggressive decks and mid-range decks and control decks, I think it's all a consideration. In Arena, this card is really, really good because Arena is kind of all about the 2-mana 3/2. You play the 2-mana 2/2 with Divine Shield, and you just destroy your opponent's 2-mana 3/2s. Like right now, one of the nightmarish Paladin openings is you go 2-mana 3/2, your opponent goes 2-mana 3/2, you go Argent Protector, you shield your guy, and then you send it in for a freebie. It's kind of like Fiery War Axe almost in Arena, since the Fiery War Axe takes out 2 3/2s. Shielded Minibot also does that. The downside is it's obvious. The upside is it's a mech. So, card is a very, very strong pick in Arena. Ship's Cannon. Whenever you summon a pirate, deal 2 damage to a random enemy, 2-mana 2/3. Like I earlier said about how every deck needs something unfair about it in order to be good. So Ship's Cannon is that unfairness. 2-mana 2/3, deal 2 damage to a random enemy whenever you summon a minion would be insane. That would be like Knife Juggler on steroids. And Knife Juggler is already good. So now you have something better than Knife Juggler. The 3 health is arguably better than a Knife Juggler's 2 health also, like the way that it's a 2/3 instead of a 3/2. The downside is you have to play pirates. But hey, maybe that's good enough. So in Constructed, prepare for the pirate deck. It's going to happen. The thing about the pirate deck is it can only be so good because it's... What? Oh. The thing about the pirate deck is it can only be so good since you have to basically include all of the pirate cards and then you include the Ship's Cannon. So like there's only so much room that you can add even more unfairness to it. But the pirate deck by default, it's looking pretty strong right now. In Arena, this card's going to be a 2-mana 2/3, better than the Crocolisk. Sometimes you happen to get the Ship's Cannon and you get a pirate. It's kind of like those times where you happen to get a South Sea Captain as an epic, and then sometimes you also get a pirate. Below average, because the 2-mana 2/3 is below average. If you somehow draft pirates, more power to you. Next up, we have a 9-mana spell. Wow, what a mana cost. Tree of Life, restore all characters to full health. Very flashy, certainly sets the tone for an epic spell. There's only one situation where this card is good. You're playing a Ramp Druid control deck, and you're up against an aggressive deck. Ramp Druid decks used to play Healing Touch in it, mostly to counter the fireballs coming in, or the kill commands, or the limited damage output that an aggressive rogue or warrior or hunter mainly deck could do. If you manage to get to 9 mana against one of those all-in decks and you cast Tree of Life, you are pretty much going to win the game unless the game has gone so disastrously for you. Like, this is one of those examples where a symmetrical effect is not all that symmetrical. You're like, what? I'm at 10 and the opponent's at 15 and we both go up to 30. That's terrible, but I mean, if you're playing this card, it's going to be in the very specific slow ramp control Druid deck. And in that sense, I kind of like the deck's design. As much as I like the card, though, I can't really see it being realistically played outside of some very, very skewed metagames. Because the card is really terrible in control versus control. Kind of similar to how Healing Touch is bad in control versus control. Except Healing Touch costs 3 and this costs 9. Trivia clarification. So, restore all characters to full health in the very specific situation where you have an Arcane Soul Priest is, first it looks at how much health you're missing. So say you're at 13 health. Restore all characters with full health would mean you gain 17 health. However, you have the Arcane Soul Priest out, which means you lose 17 health. So I guess if you're at 30 and you have the Arcane Soul Priest out, this does nothing. I mean, that's all so specific. Why am I even spouting trivia? But that's what happens, if you were curious. That's the best understanding I have with this card, and it all doesn't matter because the situation where this comes up is going to be incredibly unlikely, and when it does, it'll be over the Hearthstone subreddit, and people will be like, ha, someone Tree of Life with Organized Soul Priest, that's so funny. And then life will go on, because this never happens realistically. This card sucks in Arena, because in Arena, you rarely have such a heavy control deck that you don't worry about the opponent's health. Usually it's all the same, both players are board controlling. For the same reason that Healing Touch is bad in Arena, this card is worse. Vitality Totem. Shaman card, 2 mana, 0/3 Totem. At the end of your turn, restore 4 health to your hero. Very cool. Finally, Shamans have a way to stabilize further after they've stabilized. Which is to say, like, sometimes you manage to barely hold on, you're at 5 health, and you're just trying to kill your opponent before they draw their skill command. But now, you actually have a way to rise from the ashes, and that's what, like, healing is used for. Sometimes, in order to stabilize, you must actually gain health. So, Shamans have a way to do that, and that's cool, because the Vitality Totem seems to basically be gain 7 health almost at worst. Because you have the gain 4 health here, and then you have the 3 health on the totem, which means you gain 7. I guess the true worst case scenario is you're at 30, your opponent just has such board control that playing this life gain card is irrelevant. This card is bad in control versus control, just like health gain is generally bad in control versus control, because it's all about board control and card advantage in those matchups. But if you're up against aggressive decks, the Vitality Totem is the card for you. Similar to Healing Touch, maybe it sees a one-of in control decks if the metagame is heavily aggressive or all-in-ish. Don't be too excited about a 2 mana 0/3 gain 4 though, because it's kind of the same as Doomsayer, which is kind of a 2 mana 0/7. Like if your opponent has board, they need to kill your Doomsayer anyways. It's different, but it's about the same. So therefore, in Constructed, I'd say this is only good in the very specific scenario where there's a lot of aggression, and you might run one of it. In Arena, this card is probably quite bad, as it does not help you in board control, and oftentimes it's all just a fight over board control. You can't afford to have these cute things which only restore health to your hero. Like Mana Tide Totem is different because it draws you a card immediately. And drawing cards helps you with board control because it gives you tools to fight the board control. Having more health on your hero doesn't really do that much. Alright, Warriors got a 1-drop and a mech. 1 mana, 1/3 Warbot. What a cute little thing here. Look at that guy, he's punching things. Enrage +1 attack. This is kind of like the really old Shield Bearer for those who are old school enough to know the 1 mana 0/4 Enrage +1 attack Shield Bearer. Not much I can say here other than it's a pretty fair card. The dream is turn 1 Warbot, turn 2 Cruel Taskmaster, I suppose. In which case you have a 4/2 attacking. This has got to be an aggressive deck because a control deck can't fit a 1 mana 1/3 in there. Similar to how Handlock doesn't run Voidwalker. Control Warrior wouldn't run Warbot. It's at its best in a Enrage deck, or it's at its best in a mech deck, which is aggressive. We'll have to see whether or not such a deck archetype fits in. In Arena, this card will generally not be a good card because Voidwalker is a bad card. A 1 mana 1/3 just doesn't do enough by itself. It is a mech, which helps, so I guess like you would want to pick better mech cards. Poor in Arena is what I'll say. Spellstopper. Adjacent minions can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. Adorable, but I cannot think of any situation where this card is useful. Okay, no, that's wrong. I can think of situations where this card is useful, but I cannot think realistically in the normal flow of games of where this card justifies its cost. So for 4 mana, you can get your Water Elemental, which is 4 mana 3/6. Like, mages have so many cards on 4 already. So let's think. In Constructed, and yes, you can think of the new cards too. In what world do you want to protect your adjacent minions that you already have out, and you passed your opponent past your turn? Nah. Too situational, stats are bad. I don't think the effect justifies. If there's some kind of combo deck that comes around with Spellstopper and protecting a very important minion, then I tip my hat off to them, for they were so much more creative than I could possibly think of a situation. Okay, like, how about this? The ultimate counter to having can't be targeted by spells or hero powers is to put a minion in stealth. That card exists. It's called Master of Disguise. Master of Disguise is not being run right now, so therefore Spellstopper, unless there's specific mage reasons to run it, will also not be run. I think that's fine logic. This card sucks. In Arena, this card sucks also. Cobra Shot. Deal 3 damage to a minion and the enemy hero for Hunter. I look at this and I'm like, wait, 5? Isn't that a bit overcosted? So it does 6 damage total, but your skill command already did 5 damage. And since when do you want to split the damage like this? Like, this actually is kind of like, wow, you're splitting DPS. Why are you splitting DPS? Like, you want to hit either the hero or you want to hit a minion. Like, it's a bonus that you're hitting both. Being a bonus does not justify this mana cost. Like, this card could cost 4, I think, and then I would, like, let me try to review this card assuming it costs 4. Let me think about this. So, you're dealing 3 damage to a minion for 4. That's not bad. I mean, that is bad. And you're also dealing 3 to, like, even at 4, I'm not entirely sure this card would be any good. Card is overcosted. The ability is, like, fine and reasonable, but it just costs too much. In Arena, this card also sucks. Partly because in Arena it's more about board control, and yes, you're a hunter, so face damage doesn't matter. So, like, in Arena, probably the most appropriate that you actually deal damage to the minion and the enemy hero. But still, that costs too much. Like, 3 damage to a minion is supposed to cost 2, right? And then dealing damage to the enemy hero is a nice bonus, but 3 mana for 3 extra damage bonus? No, pass. So, Cogmaster's Wrench, a rogue weapon. 3 mana, 1/3 has +2 attack when you have a mech. Pretty straightforward card, right? So, a 3 mana 3/3 would be pretty good. 3 mana 1/3 is pretty bad. Played in a mech deck. That's a good idea. 3/3 is good in, like, I'd say in both control and in aggro. You're more likely to have mechs and keep up the aggression in aggro, I would say. Or mid-range. Like, I think mid-range rogue with Auto Barber and with this card and with some of the other mechs coming out is definitely a thing. In Arena, this card's value will depend very strongly on how many mechs you have, ranging from complete suckage to pretty good but not insane. Since in Arena rankings it's hard to say that, I will just vaguely label this as a below average card in Arena, but understand that it varies a lot. Crush! 7 mana destroy a minion. That sucks. If you have a damaged minion, this costs 4 less. 3 mana destroy a minion. That's awesome. Obviously, a card dream come true for those Enrage Warrior decks. You play a card, you play Taskmaster on it, you crush, you play a card, you Death Spite the opponent's face or a minion, and then you crush. This is part of the, like, I love this card so much, the design of it, because it's a card specifically designed to be overpowered in specific scenarios. This is one of those cards that changes, well, does it change? Like, can it even fit in the current control deck? You play Acolyte of Pain, you play Taskmaster on it, and then you crush something. It costs a total of 8 mana. You have the Death Spite. Maybe it's already good enough that it doesn't only fit in an Enraged deck. I certainly think it'll see play. In Arena, this card, it ranges somewhere between average and good, I think. Or maybe it's excellent. Finally, Artosis can execute his own Sylvanas. That's a good one. Now you can crush your own Sylvanas. Is this not just a 2 more cost execute? Okay, kind of true. Suppose you had Acolyte of Pain, Cruel Taskmaster, and execute/crush. So you would much rather Acolyte of Pain, Taskmaster your Acolyte, and then crush the opponent's minion, rather than Taskmaster your opponent's minion and then crush it. And then, of course, you would much rather execute plus Taskmaster. And it's like, how many effects do you really want with this? It's just so much better for Enraged decks, I suppose. Card will see a lot of play and experimentation. My anticipation is maybe one copy of it makes its way into control warrior decks. Might be too clunky to run two of them. Unless control warrior decks rely on like damaging minions more. And in rage decks, like if they're a thing, expect Crush to be a mainstay. And it's nice that you can actually play Crush on 7 mana still, so it's never completely useless. Fel Reaver. Whenever your opponent plays a card, discard the top 3 cards of your deck. 5 mana, 8/8. Wow. A lot of people have said something along the lines of worst card in Goblins vs. Gnomes or some such madness. I think this is one of the coolest or best cards of Goblins vs. Gnomes. Like, this card is unfair by itself. 5 mana, 8/8. So many people look at discard the top 3 cards of your deck as a weakness of some sort. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get 7 for 1. The opponent plays 2 cards. But as long as you don't fatigue, the card's fun. I think that I would be perfectly willing to play this in, or to at least experiment with it in mid-range or even like aggro finishes. At the very least, I really admire the design of this card. Against certain decks, it's incredibly overpowered. Against some decks, like Miracle, you lose the game if you play it. But hey, Miracle Rogue is dead, right? In Arena, I think this card is going to be amazing. I have to look at the clarification for it, but since you don't draw the cards, like say you go into fatigue, I don't believe the Fel Reaver actually causes you fatigue. But when you draw the cards, of course, you will start fatiguing. I'm just thinking of the scenario where in Arena, they play this 5 mana 8/8 card. Like, what are you going to do? And yes, you can silence the effect. It's kind of nice to self-silence on this one. But, like, discarding random cards doesn't matter to me, as long as you don't fatigue into it. Like, there's going to be very few plays in Arena that beat 5 mana 8/8. You've got your Venture Mercenary, which is an excellent play on turn 5 mana 7/6. Usually your opponent has to deal with it immediately, usually by taking severe losses. Fel Reaver provides an alternate win for your opponent, but usually you'll win faster. And you have to have some heart when you're playing this game. Kind of like Deathlord, it's tough to evaluate because it has a severe drawback, yes. Imagine the world where your opponent will cast, like, in Constructed, about 2 cards each turn, post Fel Reaver. You play your Fel Reaver, your opponent plays 2 cards, maybe it doesn't deal with your Fel Reaver. You discard 6 cards from your deck, use your Fel Reaver to either attack face, you hit a minion, whatever. The opponent plays 2 more cards, you discard 6 cards. So you're down 12 cards, your Fel Reaver gives you like 16 damage to face. It's clearly an extremely dangerous card, but has severe upside just by the stats. Don't write it off, don't call it OP, but I certainly like it in my Gambit decks. And yes, you can always play it and then follow it up with a silence on this. That would probably be worth silencing. Floating Watcher. As it is a Warlock card, everyone immediately pretty much points out, hey, it's good with the hero ability. Yes, that's true. Whenever your hero takes damage on your turn, gain +2/+2. But here's the thing. The turn you play this, it's 5 mana 4/4. If you play it and then tap, it's 7 mana 6/6. Draw a card. And you play it with Flame Imp. 6 mana 6/6 and you get a 3/2. It's interesting. Strong demon, I'd say. Some people are saying it's absolutely broken. No, I don't think so. In current Zoo, like Zoo doesn't really want to run a 5 mana 4/4 either. Here's the thing. Say you're Zoo, you kind of have to empty your hand as fast as possible. So if you have this on turn 5, you're obligated to play it. And it's a 5 mana 4/4. This is a card that might cause the Voidcaller to be even better, and maybe a demon deck does appear mid-range, since you can sacrifice your Voidcaller, summon the Floating Watcher, and have it enter play as a 6/6, since that makes it that you can easily tap. Or then you can like also play Dread Inferno along with it, perhaps. So it's a card that doesn't fit into any current archetype, but I anticipate seeing a lot of people trying it out in a Demon Lock deck or in a mid-range Warlock deck, or even a Control Warlock deck which is not Handlock. Pretty interesting. You probably wouldn't put it in a Handlock deck because you would be able to get more value with Giants, and it's tough to fit even more big stuff in there. And in a Handlock deck, it's impractical at the moment because it's a 7 mana 6/6 or a 5 mana 4/4. In Arena, this card is going to be, I had to hesitate before saying quite good. you have the flexibility of doing a 5 mana 4/4, and you have the flexibility of doing a 7 mana 6/6 draw a card. 7 mana 6/6 draw a card, that's pretty good, and lose 2 health. And it's kind of like a choose one in that respect. Yeah, should be quite good in Arena. Glaivezooka! Nice basic card here. Hunters get a 2 mana weapon. Obviously you want to have a minion out already. Hard to see this card getting played because it's fair. There's nothing unfair about this card. So let's imagine. Turn 1 you go Web Spinner. Turn 2 you go Glaivezooka. Your Web Spinner gets +1 attack. Maybe it trades into their 3/2 in the best of scenarios. And then you have like 2 mana 2/2. Kind of similar to Stormforged Axe in the sense that it kind of doesn't do enough. Barely. Like Fire War Axe is obviously a really strong card. And it deserves to only be in Warrior, so you can't really quite compare it, but Fire War Axe is better than Glaivezooka. Pretty much near objectively. It is worth mentioning that the friendly minion +1 attack is permanent. It's a fair card. Tough to really pin down where this card is great at, because instead of playing Glaivezooka in an aggressive deck, you'd certainly want to play Mad Scientist instead of, like, Web Spinner, Glaivezooka. I would say Web Spinner, Mad Scientist would be better. Things like that. In a control deck, are you really looking to give a friendly minion +1 attack? That's also a little bit unusual. Why wouldn't you just play Eaglehorn Bow? Maybe with all the Goblins versus Gnomes cards, you can't fit the Eaglehorn Bow in because the secrets don't fit, so you decide to run Glaivezooka instead. But in that case, maybe you just don't run weapons. Anyways, a fair card. In Arena, this card's actually going to be quite good because it has the potential for 3-for-1ing your opponent for the same reason why Stormforged Axe is really good. 2.5 for 1 is a better way to say it, or a 2-for-1 in an early game. A fair card. Lightbomb. Deal damage to each minion equal to its attack. Kind of twisting Nether at a significantly more fair level here. I don't want to make a sweeping statement like most minions will kill themselves if they deal their attack damage to themselves. Yes, it kills guys in stealth mostly. Yes, it's strong against handlock, but you know, we said the same thing about poison seeds. It has more applications than poison seeds because it usually kills the smaller guys also. It's really tough to evaluate this one. I can't imagine running 2 of this because it seems clunky. But at the same time, you know, Arcanized Priest plus Circle of Healing, when it first came out and for about the first 6 months of Hearthstone, I kept calling it clunky also. I was like, oh, it's never going to work. How are you going to draw your Arcanized Soul Priest and a Circle of Healing at the same time? So situational. And hey, maybe it is situational. Maybe you replace it with a more consistent Lightbomb if it turns out to be more consistent. That is a lot of mana, though. It's a Shadow Flame, which doesn't require you to have a minion out, and you'd have to, like, specifically Shadow Flame Ancient Watcher for this to have the same mana. I guess it's easier to compare this with Flame Strike. It's 1 mana less than Flame Strike. Would Priest run Flame Strike if it could? Maybe. Probably. It is symmetrical, so it's closer to Hellfire. But if you're playing a card like Lightbomb, presumably you're not running many minions. So, I mean, I'll state the obvious, this is for a control deck. So the question is, and I've played Priest Controls some time now, so would I run Lightbomb in my Priest Control deck? What would I remove for it? Would I remove Arcanized Circle for it? Is there room for it? You've got the Pyromancer already, which is really efficient with all the shields and all that. I'm not sure. In Arena, this card is a severe catch-up mechanism in that if you get really far behind, you can Light Bomb, and then it'll hurt them a lot more. If you're like even, of course you won't Light Bomb. If you're ahead, you won't Light Bomb. But cards which are better when you're behind, similar to Twisting Nether, are quite good. I'm not calling Twisting Nether good. I'm saying it's a Twisting Nether-esque effect for 6. Similar to Poison Seeds, but with much less downside, and sometimes it whiffs because their attack value does not kill their own minion, but most of the time it does. It's interesting. Just because sometimes it doesn't work. In cases such as Ogres, Druid of Claw, heavier minions like 3/5s, I will go for a stretch that this card is poor in Arena, but worth trying out. Alright, Grove Tender, 3 mana 2/4 Druid card. Very cool effect. Supposedly symmetrical. Give each player a mana crystal or each player draws a card. The reason why Cold Light Oracle sucks is it's a symmetric effect, yes, but 3 mana 2/2 is bad. What if Cold Light Oracle was a 3 mana 2/4? Then the card itself would obviously be a lot better because you buff any minion by 2 health and it's good, but would you see Cold Light Oracle run in these decks? I'm not sure. Grove Tender, like, you have this setup potential where you go coin Wild Growth into Grove Tender, and then on turn, and then you go like Druid of the Claw. But the opponent is also boosted by 1. Some have argued that Druid is so much better to spend all the mana on. Yes, you can build a deck that spends mana better than your opponent. If you're up against an aggressive deck, you kind of don't want both players to draw a card. If you're up against a control deck and you like need to finish it out by drawing your second part of Force of Nature Savage Roar combo, then you would love both players to draw a card. Since the card that you're giving them has much less utility than the card you're giving yourself. Since the card you're giving yourself could win the game, the card you're giving them, especially if they're a control deck and have several cards in hand already, just gives them slightly more options. So it's a fair card. Very interesting. Not sure if it's actually good enough to see play. There's all this outcry of mill Druid, but really, are you going to try to mill your opponent by making both players draw 1 card? That's not even really milling. That's like getting both players to fatigue at the same rate. This is one of those cards which I hesitate to make a call on because it could easily be a staple and every Druid deck will run it, because it turns out that giving each player a mana crystal after a lot of play turns out to be good. Similar to how Wild Growth was first initially thought to be poor because it didn't do enough for 2 mana or it was too slow, and now nearly every Druid deck runs it. Like, Grove Tender has the potential as a 2/4. It is a reasonable card. You have the choice of like which symmetrical effect is better unleashed, but I'm going to just call it an average card, because I cannot really see playing it in my ramp Druid deck or in my mid-range deck at the moment. And in Arena, a 3 mana 2/4, that's about average. You get to give the opponent the choice of which symmetrical effect is worse. Slightly above average. Imp-losion, very cute card. You deal damage to a minion as a Warlock, and then imps come flying out. Pretty significant randomness here. I mean, the flavor is oozing. So you can deal 2 damage and summon 2 1/1 imps, or you can deal 4 damage and summon 4 1/1 imps. Obviously the middle effect too. So at what place is it good? Well, I guess you could evaluate each piece by itself. 4 mana, you get a Keeper of the Grove, which deals 2 damage to a minion, and you get a 2/4. Keeper of the Grove is a excellent card. So getting 2 1/1s is significantly worse than getting a 2/4. That's pretty bad. 3 damage. So Wrath is 2 mana, deal 3 damage. For an extra 2 mana, you summon 3 1/1s. Pretty good deal. Then of course, 4 mana, deal 4 damage. That's Shadowbolt plus 1 mana. For 1 extra mana, you get 4 imps. Seems like the average is average. The below average is below average. The above average is above average. Yeah. I think it's too inconsistent to run in a control deck, or in a constructed deck. And in Arena, this card should be pretty good, since we're comparing it to the likes of Shadowbolt, which is pretty good. And for 1 mana more than Shadowbolt, you are on average dealing 1 less damage by getting 3 1/1s. And if you consider each 1/1 as dealing 1 damage, then you would get something like 3 mana deal 6 damage, which seems absurd, but you can't really consider 3 1/1 imps as dealing 3 damage. You know, after just saying that little bit of piece, like, if you consider each 1/1 as dealing 1 damage, then that is kind of average Fireball. Oh, I didn't consider that spell damage increases the amount of imps you get. That's kind of fascinating. And the imps are presumably demons also. Worth mentioning, this doesn't work with Hobgoblin before people say it does, since you're summoning imps similar to the Paladin hero ability or Muster, and it's only Hobgoblin only counts for played. Play Malagos and then Imp-losion. Oh boy. Has a slight chance of breaking it into constructed, should be good in Arena. Mini-Mage, 4 mana, 4/1, stealth, spell damage +1. So the theory is that a spell damage is pretty good, especially if it stays in the game for a long time, and stealth could pull that off. But here's another card, which is 1 health, which has never seen play in Constructed, which also has stealth. Patient Assassin. He thinks spell damage is pretty good, but what's really good is an Assassinate on 2 mana. But just turned out that Patient Assassin never quite worked out because there were just too many ways to randomly deal 1 damage to your stealth minion. Goblins vs. Gnomes introduces a few more sources of random damage. I don't think it's really the random damage that's going to get it in Constructed as much as the focused area of effect damage, such as Phantom Knives or Knife Juggler, well, which is not focused but generally run. It costs 4 mana for 1 health. It's not going to work out, I would say. In Arena, for the same reason why Organ Infiltrator is good, Mini-Mage might be acceptable. Still a weak card, and spell damage doesn't matter as much in Arena. So it would basically be using it as a delayed removal card, which is unexciting as well since it's 4 mana, deal 4 damage. Weak card. Powermace. Shaman class card. 3 mana, 3/2, so Fiery War Axe +1 mana. Death Rattle, give a random friendly mech +2/+2. So basically, you're paying for the Fiery War Axe, and for 1 more mana, you give a +2/+2 bonus. That's completely fair. It's even good. You'll see it in a mech deck. And similar to Death's Bite, you can easily work it out so that you are going to give the effect of the Death Rattle something good. In Arena, Eaglehorn Bow is good even if you don't have charges of secrets, because a 3 mana 3/2 weapon turns out to be good. This card's going to be even better because the Death Rattle actually has a good effect. And I'd say in Arena you should almost certainly be able to get this to trigger on a mech if you're trying at all. Good card. How many more cards do we have left?
Goblins and gnomes. Goblins and gnomes. Both are super brilliant, but you would never know. Everything they seem to make is faulty or explode. Perfecting imperfection. Goblins and gnomes.
Unleash Goblin Fury!
For Gnome Ragon!